Hi folks, Jenny Mitchell here. If you know me, you know that I am somebody who is really passionate about having meaningful conversations. So I have put together a video that you'll see in a second that is part of a bigger training for Chavenger, but I wanted to make this one available to you as a standalone because it has all sorts of tips, advice, training, and suggestions for how to have more meaningful conversations in your life. Something I say to my coaching clients a lot of the time is be brave enough to have conversations that matter. Enjoy. I'd like you to think of this module as being a standalone. It's a cornucopia of tools and ideas to help you have meaningful conversations. Full disclosure, once you learn these, you will find yourself having these conversations everywhere, not just at work, but at home and with your kids, with your parents. It becomes a way of approaching all conversations in your lives. One of my personal passions is that I want people to have conversations about the real stuff, not just the fluff stuff, but the stuff that really matters. Sharing information about how you choose to give to charity and the core values that you live by, and always having powerful conversations. And so, on this module, I challenge you to be brave enough to start conversations that matter. So how do you do that? It sounds a little daunting when I say it like that. Nope. No, it is not. And I'm going to divide this in my head into two categories: how you show up and what tools you use. So let's start with how you show up. I like to think of myself in these conversations as a chameleon, ready to adapt and adjust based on the person in front of me. My job is to reflect what I am getting back from them. Sidebar comment here, neuroscience tip. Did you know that we have mirror neurons in our brains that are reflecting back to us the vibe and energy of the other person when we're talking? Brain science actually tells us that at a subconscious level, we are picking up on the other person's energy and making decisions on whether we want to have a relationship with them at this limbic or reptilian brain level. It's human nature to trust our gut when it comes to relationships. Okay. Here are some examples of how you might mirror a person. And as you read through this list, you'll probably see some things that you do pretty naturally. And my challenge to you on this video is to pick one example and commit to using it over the next few weeks. Add it to your toolkit. So pace. When you're with business people, you will adapt to their pace. They will tend to have a specific amount of time and will expect you to get right to the point. Sentences are going to be shorter, more succinct, more direct. In contrast, anyone who's done a planned giving visit in a senior's home will know that your visit is a huge deal. Expect to spend a lot of time listening to stories, enjoying tea and cookies. That is all part of this beautiful experience. And either way, enjoy it. Another sidebar on pace. You will most likely adapt the pace of your language to the person you are speaking with as well. So you'll find you'll speak a little slower for older folks and maybe a little bit faster for your younger folks or your business people. Eye contact. Eye contact is incredibly important, even in a Zoom world. You want to be able to see and be seen by the person in front of you. Shifty eyes are a built-in biological sign of untrustworthiness. Wow, that's a big word. It doesn't matter what you're saying. 80% of communications for humans is through nonverbal cues. And if you can't make eye contact, humans will believe you are not trustworthy. Smiling. That may sound cheesy, so I'm going to caveat this with, if it feels weird to smile constantly, think about smiling with your eyes. Keep a warm glow behind your eyes. It will create a warm energy that you can integrate into your conversation. And just a quick note, I do this when I call people over the phone. It's another way to engage those mirror neurons I was talking about earlier. And in the human world, a smile is the most disarming gesture you can make. Using people's first names. The most important word in any person's vocabulary is their name. Use it during your conversations to ground the person and acknowledge that you see them. Now, you do have to be careful not to overuse it, but it is a powerful way to build strong rapport in a short period of time. Try to avoid physical barriers. If you can avoid it, try not to get stuck behind a desk or some other barrier in front of you. It really messes up the energy between two people and sets up an us-them mentality for the meeting. And the same thing goes for crossing your arms. Beware of how it looks to be closed off from conversations. Work hard to make your body as open and as accessible as possible. Pace, eye contact, smiling, using first names, avoiding physical barriers. How are you feeling? Okay, so now here are 3 more how you show up items. Embracing the possibility of the universe. I truly believe that to have a meaningful conversation, you need to let go of all the potential baggage and old stories you might have about the person or the situation. I like to think of an open heart, expanding to embrace the person you're talking to. You might even have a mantra or a statement you say before every conversation so you can be brave enough to have a conversation that matters. And remember, you are in service to the person in front of you. Connecting with them is your opportunity. Let the universe know that you're ready for whatever might happen. You also need to let go of expectations. We get so caught up in ourselves and our hang-ups about fundraising or what the person might say and all that lovely junk. Let go of your expectations for the conversation and just focus on them and where the discussion might take you. Be present and listen. Ask open-ended questions to guide the conversation to wherever it may go. And remember, beware of the conversation framework: introduction, connection, and closing. But be flexible too. All right, being vulnerable. Meaningful conversations happen when someone chooses to be vulnerable and say something that means something to them. Be brave enough to go first. Be brave enough to share why you, as a volunteer, are passionate about the organization. Go first. Be the one that speaks openly and honestly first. All the things we have mentioned previously set the stage for conversations. Now let's look at the conversation tools you can use. Okay, conversation tools. Here are some techniques that you can play with in upcoming conversations. Practice them and add them to your vocabulary. Reframe or validate. This tool is a great way to confirm your understanding of what someone just said. You will explain what you heard to them using their words. So a reframe might sound like, I appreciate you telling me about your passion for cancer research. May I ask if the passion expands to cancer patient care as well? Or validate. What I've learned from this conversation is that cancer research is a top priority for your foundation. Am I correct about that? Being curious. Being observant is a volunteer's secret weapon. When you shine that big, beautiful flashlight on the person you're talking to, it's amazing what they will share with you. This might sound like, I'm curious to learn more about your connection to X, or I'm fascinated by Y. Can you tell me more? And folks, let's be genuine, right? We're not asking if we're not genuinely interested, but people, in my experience, are absolutely fascinating and go with it. I will often use myself as an example. So I will speak to how I handle a situation or what I did when something happened. It normalizes the experience and includes the donor in this conversation. So the translation that the donor hears is, you're not alone. Lots of people experience this, and here are some ways they have handled it, right? Or another thing I will do is use another donor as an example. I will say, I knew a donor that had a similar situation. I don't name them, by the way, just a donor. I will share the donor's concern and their thought process and how they resolved it or how they thought about it. Again, this is all about normalizing the conversation, making the donor feel less alone and hopefully more confident in their decision to get to know you. The drip and listen. This is my favorite. It's my very favorite one. It's when I drip something into the conversation and listen to see if the donor or prospect picks it up. I might mention a naming opportunity for a wing or an exciting project I've just started on. If the donor picks it up and asks about it, I know I have hit on something interesting to them. If they pass right by, like on the highway, then I can continue to drip things into the conversation. So a drip and listen might sound like, and here's where we recognize all of our $10,000 donors. Or, I'd just love to name a room after your family. The cool part is that, again, the donor is in charge. You wait to see if they pick up on it. How about stories? Stories are probably the single most powerful way to connect as humans. Here's a tip. You need two things: emotions and details. When you tell a story, and by the way, you should practice your stories so that you get good at them, you want to name the emotions that you were feeling at the time. You want to ground the listener in how you felt. So label it. I felt scared, I felt happy, relieved, whatever it is. And secondly, be sure to include specific details that will help the listener experience the story with you. For example, the IV machine kept making this sharp beeping noise every few minutes, and it kept distracting me from my loved one in the bed. So look for the moment in the story where the feeling hits you, and then look to find a detail that describes this to the listener. My final piece of advice on stories is to take out all the unnecessary jargon and bits and pieces. Make a game out of shortening your backstory to a few points and really focus in on the moment in the story where you felt something. It is very challenging to be your own editor, but remember that the human brain easily gets overwhelmed, so feed it the key points so that you can remember the story effectively. Sidebar again, it's actually your amygdala or your reptilian brain that logs your emotions. So if you can help the listener feel something, then you are much more likely to have them remember that story you're telling. It's kind of cool, eh? All right, asking permission. You have already heard me say this 1,000 times, that the donor is in charge of the relationship. And asking permission is the respectful way to see what's next. So it could sound like this. Could I follow up with you in 2 weeks? Would that work for you? May I ask, have you given any thought to your charitable giving in your will? Would you like me to pull together a proposal in the range of X for our next meeting? It gives the donor a transparency that is very much appreciated. They get the opportunity to tell you what they're comfortable with. It eliminates all that crazy uncertainty, and it creates great trust between all parties. I ask permission all the time, at home, with colleagues, with donors. It's a simple yet powerful tool for being clear and transparent on next steps. And remember, if you don't say it out loud and if you don't actually articulate it, no one is clear about what's going to happen next. You manage the relationship as the volunteer. You provide an offer to the donor to learn more. So final thoughts on engaging donors. And if you're like me and you're a genuinely curious person, these outreach calls can be truly awesome. As long as you focus on the donor or the prospect and genuinely focus on learning more about them, you can't go wrong. These conversations can be a lovely interlude in our crazy, crazy lives. What a gift to focus solely on a human connection. Remember to focus on small yeses, simple actions, and follow-up items so you can make your visit as impactful as possible. You've got this. Congrats on learning all of these engagement tools. Here's a quick recap. 2 things that matter: how you show up and what tools you use. And remember that goal of mirroring the donor or prospect, right? So pacing, eye contact, smiling or smiling behind your eyes, using people's first names, avoid physical barriers, and embrace the possibility of the universe. Letting go of expectations, being vulnerable. And remember, we have those tools that we learned: reframing and validating, being curious, using yourself as an example. Use another donor as an example. Ask permission, may I? And the drip and listen. And finally, telling a story. Congrats! Whew! That was a meaty module. Our garden of community is growing strong thanks to all of your relationship tending.